Maybe God is asking us a serious question. Will you keep waiting for outsiders to revive your faith, or will you become missionaries yourselves?
Today, as we celebrate the feast of St. Francis Xavier, we cannot ignore what is happening in our own country. In Nagaland, thousands of Christians were preparing with great hope for a time of renewal, waiting to welcome the American evangelist Franklin Graham. Instead, they heard the news that the Indian government had denied him a visa, canceling his visit and causing deep hurt and anger among many believers and student groups who felt their faith and freedom were being restricted. Whatever one's opinion about his style of preaching, it is clear that a public Christian voice was refused entry, and many of our brothers and sisters in the Northeast feel silenced and disappointed. 500 years ago, St. Francis Xavier could arrive in Goa, travel along our coasts and across Asia, and preach Christ openly to those who wished to listen. Today, Indian visa rules strictly limit foreign religious preaching, missionary visas are tightly controlled, and tourist visas explicitly forbid public evangelization or propagation of faith. The denial of a visa in Nagaland is a sign of this changed reality. But it also carries a message for us. The age of waiting for foreign missionaries to revive our faith is over. Now the responsibility lies with us, the Christians of India, to carry the fire of the gospel. Our story of faith in this land began not with Europe, but with St. Thomas the Apostle, who, according to ancient tradition, brought the gospel to India and planted living communities of believers in the south. Centuries later, when zeal had grown weak, God raised up Francis Xavier, who came in 1542 and spent just 10 years crossing seas, learning languages, catechizing children, consoling the sick and the poor, and carrying Christ as far as Japan. God used great missionaries from outside, but always to awaken a faith that had to be lived day by ordinary local Christians. At the same time, Francis Xavier was not blind to injustice. He saw the cruelty of slavery and the harsh treatment of local people under Portuguese power along the coasts of India. Historical accounts tell us he wrote strongly to King John III of Portugal, denouncing the slave trade and the violent abuses against the people, and warning that such behavior was a scandal to the gospel. On ships and in Goa, he spent hours serving slaves, prisoners, the sick, and abandoned children, insisting by his actions that true mission must defend human dignity, not use people as tools. So Francis Xavier teaches us both to evangelize and to stand against any system that treats people as less than children of God. To bring this closer to our time, let me share an experience that a priest friend of mine once told. A few years ago, he joined a small mission trip to a tiny coastal village in the Philippines after a devastating typhoon. It was nothing like Francis Xavier's epic journeys, but for this city priest it was already a big step out of his comfort zone. One hot afternoon, he found himself sitting with an elderly fisherman who had lost his boat and half his home. The language barrier was huge, he could hardly say hello properly in Tagalog. Yet they simply sat together. The priest passed him some tools to repair a neighbor's damaged roof, and in return the fisherman slowly showed him how to weave palm fronds to make a simple shelter, both of them sweating under the same relentless sun. There were no long sermons, no microphones, no crowds, just shared work, a little rice, and a quiet prayer. At the end of the day, with tears in his eyes, the old man squeezed his hand and said words that the translator later rendered as, "Today, you brought Jesus here." It was not the priest's power, it was the same fire that burned in Francis Xavier, but now flickering in a small, hidden moment of love. Stories like this remind us that mission is not only grand events and famous names, it begins wherever our feet are planted. In our India today, with rising materialism, aggressive politics, and suspicion toward minorities, it is easy to become afraid, to hide, or to wait for someone big to come and solve our spiritual problems. The Nagaland visa denial shows that we cannot rely on outside figures to stir our faith. But the lives of St. Thomas, St. Francis Xavier, and countless simple missionaries whisper another truth: God is ready to use anyone whose heart is available. If foreign evangelists cannot come, then God turns to us and says, "Will you go? Will you speak? Will you serve?" The Spirit who set Francis Xavier on fire is the same Spirit given to every baptized Christian in this land. So on this feast, let us ask for 3 graces. First, the grace of deep prayer, because without union with Christ, our words are empty. Second, the grace of courage, to defend the dignity of every person and to stand against all modern forms of slavery and injustice. Third, the grace of small, faithful mission, to bring Jesus into one conversation, one act of service, one home, one village, one online space at a time. If we say yes to this, then even closed borders and denied visas cannot stop the gospel, because Christ will walk through India not on foreign passports, but in our own hearts, our own hands, our own lives. Amen.